Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. As the war with Iran gets messier, so does President Trump's messaging about it. Tonight, in the span of about 3 hours, the president gave wildly different accounts about where the conflict stands right now.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. Short-term. Short-term.
We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete.
On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to...
soon.
Now, it's not clear what the actual status of the war is, but the president's comments contradict what his own defense secretary said just recently.
What I want your viewers to understand is this is only just the beginning.
Hegseth's Department of War echoed that statement, writing on social media just hours before Trump spoke, "We have only just begun to fight." And if you're keeping track of all the various reasons why the Trump administration decided to go to war with Iran, the president offered up a new justification today.
Iran's a very powerful country. They were going to take over the Middle East. If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East. They had thousands and thousands since their last hit. They had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else.
What are the American people supposed to believe, Mark?
Look, I think the American people should know that for 47 years, Iran's been trying to attack Americans and Westerners. For 47 years, they've launched attacks on Marines in Lebanon. They've funded Hezbollah. They funded Hamas. And so I think they should know the president is committed to trying to demilitarize Iran and take away the offensive capability they have.
But don't they deserve real answers about where this war is right now, where it's headed, how long it may be, what the military objectives are, how close we are to reaching those objectives, any of that?
I think some of the objectives could be clear, and I think one thing that would be helpful is if the administration had fewer people speaking on their behalf. I think that would help keep the messaging simpler. But I don't know that there is confusion as to where we are in this offensive, Abby. I think that we've clearly eliminated the Navy for Iran. We've clearly eliminated the Air Force. We've taken away a lot of their offensive capabilities. And so I think there is still a question of, like, what is the long-term mission here? But I think there's not a question about what's been happening thus far.
I think Mark is right that this administration has taken incredible military action to eliminate Iran's naval capabilities, air defenses, I mean, you name it. But I think the president is also trying to have it both ways and saying that we've eliminated all of these military capabilities, and yet we have to continue to go on because they pose such a threat. Where, last year in June, you heard this administration take a winning lap saying that we've destroyed and obliterated all their military capabilities. So I think you're hearing conflicting messages because no one can also get on the same page and have the same picture of where Iran actually is.
And to that point, I mean, the president said, you heard him saying that Iran was about to take over the Middle East had they not struck. But here's what the rest of his administration has been saying over the last few weeks and over the last year. Listen.
That regime is probably weaker than it has ever been.
This president sees the threat plainly and acts decisively. No more half measures, especially when Iran is at its weakest.
This is the weakest they've ever been. Now is the time to go after them.
The reason President Trump went now is because they're at their weakest point.
So look, I mean, I guess the real question is, why not just tell the truth? I mean, if the truth is what Mark said, which is that Iran is a nuisance, we decided to take them out, regardless of the immediate threat that they posed in this moment, why not just say that? And then also tell us what you want to see at the end of the day. Is it a new regime? Is it just that you want to take out their capabilities? I think honesty is the piece that I think is missing here.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Iran, absolutely a threat, right? So the why of Iran isn't, I think, in dispute. At least it's not with me. It's the why now. And I think that the why now matters because there was this kind of improvisation going on. And I feel like we almost kind of stumbled into this by accident. And therefore, the lack of clarity about what we want, it produced that. So, I went to the National War College. I studied war. And it's very clear what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have ends as the first thing you define, and then you work on ways and means in order to get there. And instead, I think we're focused kind of on ways and means, and we kind of miss the end. But the end is very clear, and it has been very well defined by the Defense Department, and the Navy, and the missile threat, make sure that there isn't nuclear. And we've achieved those things or are very, very close. And that's what the president said today, right? So I kind of sense that if he had just almost stuck with what we were this afternoon, maybe we would be on a different path. But somebody talked to him, and we're in this kind of, oh, wait, maybe we're not over yet.
Keep going.
But
what about the political aspect of it? Because that's the other thing that the president keeps bringing up. He wants to see a more compliant, more pliable regime, and he doesn't seem to be getting that. Let me just play what a senior Iranian official told CNN this week in an interview.
I don't see any room for diplomacy anymore. Iranian military is quite strong, as you see, because they have the motivation, they have the arms that they need, which are produced in Iran. As a matter of fact, we are not dependent on any other country for weapons and arms.
So there's that. There's the fact that Ali Khamenei's son is a hardliner, has been appointed as the new supreme leader. On the political side of things, are we going to then not meet the president's own objectives, which is to have an Iran that he can work with, an Iran that's doing what he wants them to do?
Well, I mean, what does he want them to do? He wants them to not have nuclear weapons. He wants them to not have a ballistic missile program. He wants them to not have an aggressive Navy, and he wants them to not be an exporter of terrorism around the world. Now, whatever happens to the next regime, I don't know, but I know this: we will not permit them to do any of those things. The nuclear piece, to me, is the most important. You cannot have a nuclear-armed Iran. They showed up at the negotiations with Witkoff and said, oh, well, we've got enough material to make 11 nuclear weapons. Well, I think having them described as ultimately being compliant or someone you can work with, I don't think that's the vector. What you have to understand about these people is that they're fanatics. They would like to bring about the end of the world by causing a nuclear war that brings in the religious piece of this for them. So they're not going to ever be compliant about that. They have this worldview. We have to take away their capacity to enact that worldview, which is, to me, why the nuclear piece is a vital issue. You cannot have them sitting out there with any material.
For now,
we're talking,
but
I mean,
then
I think we're talking about the leadership of Iran. We're talking about the individuals who, the ones you were referring to, because I actually agree with everybody at the table. I know this is a show where we come on and we're supposed to, have our differing opinions and probably climb across the table. But the facts are this. We had an Iran nuclear deal, which, however you feel about it, Iran was not closer to a nuclear weapon when that deal was in place than when Donald Trump tore it up. We know that. I mean, Barack Obama actually went out and actually negotiated with these people and had an Iran nuclear deal. And now we're talking about, we have 6 soldiers, 6 people.
7 now.
7 who have died. Nobody's mentioned that yet. We have 7 people. And the part about it that drives the American public crazy is they don't know why. They're afraid of having another Afghanistan. They're afraid of having another Iraq. I mean, you can't.
It's been 1 week.
Well,
it's literally been 1 week.
I would like to add on to Scott's point, though.
Why is that?
Scott actually is right. I agree with Scott on the nuclear program.
Why do we minimize that, though?
But I think Scott makes, and like we've been talking about this, like the nuclear program is something that everyone is concerned about. But an air campaign alone is not going to get at the nuclear program.
I mean,
actually
we didn't
get
obliterate
to the issue.
We did not obliterate their nuclear program.
I completely agree with you on that.
No, we obliterated facilities. But obviously, they retained nuclear material, and they also, and I think the key issue is,
isn't that relevant? I mean, if that's I think that's my follow-up to what you said earlier was all of those objectives, military objectives. It seems plausible that they can be achieved in this moment. But if you have a regime that is fundamentally more radicalized and aimed at the same things as they were before, it's just a matter of time. It seems like it's a matter of time before they rearm, before they reconstitute their missile program or their drone program or their nuclear program. And so are we just deferring this?
I mean, we could be. I think that, look, Israel has been mowing the grass, as they call it. It's kind of an unpleasant phrase, but it's like, you look at the problem set, and if it pops up, whack-a-mole, you whack it down again, right? That's been the path that we're on. And so here's where I hear the president this afternoon talking. He says, if we're not going to change this regime, we might as well just get rid of it once and for all. And so there is an issue that, we've waded into this war of choice, a war of choice. It was not a threat. I completely disagree with the president that the United States' immediate interests were at threat at this moment. I do not agree with that. But, here we are. And I think that this is something that we all have to grapple with. What is the threat? Is it better to keep mowing the grass? I think that maybe in the long run it is, because I think that Iran will not have the missile capability to strike us. Iran will not have the nuclear capability to strike us. And we can watch and see whether it reconstitutes. Should we be doing a deal with the devil? This is a question Americans should be answering.
I don't know.
And I think it's complicated.
I think it's hard to say that there's
just
not a threat when
until...
just a couple years ago they slaughtered thousands of Israelis. They continue to fund the terrorist attacks on Westerners.
Sure.
And that has not stopped. So to say they're not a threat, I don't agree.
I guess
I
don't think
they're
anybody
not
is
going to have
suggesting
missiles
that they're
to
not.
do what they were doing.
They're not
before.
bad actors.
Because they're taken care of.
But hold on,
Exactly.
nobody's suggesting that they're not bad actors. I think the question is the bar for the United States to engage in offensive military action is a threat to us on the homeland. And I do think that that's what has always been in question. That's why the administration itself, at the beginning, tried to make it sound like there was an imminent threat when there wasn't. They
What's
later
the end
acknowledged
game? I mean, I guess my question to Mark and Scott is so we all agree on Iran not being a great actor, to say the least, right? Over the last 47 years, as you articulated very clearly when you opened up, I mean, Iran has just funded terrorism. I mean, they are a bad actor on the world stage. They are a threat to our greatest ally in Israel in the middle. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But what we're not getting, and one of the reasons why I wish Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump actually went to Congress so we could have this debate. That's why you do it. And I think they would have actually been more successful than they would have guessed.
Or used his State of the Union to outline.
But what is
to telegraph to the enemy that we were coming?
But the enemy
did that anyway.
Yeah,
but my point is,
building an armada.
What is the?
That's telegraphed.
How do we get out of this? And my last question is, how do we make sure 7's not 14 or 21 or 700? What's the cost?
When do we stop? But let me just say we have more to discuss on this as we go ahead. There, much more. New evidence appears that the U.S. is responsible for the strike on an Iranian school, and tonight the president is responding to that. Plus, between the markets and gas prices, are the economic shockwaves going to be the thing that ends this war sooner? Trump is making a huge threat to Iran over oil tonight. Stay with us.